What would be the best way to dispose of a body? It's a disturbing thought that must go through the mind of a killer after committing a murder. Well, here are 5 of the most horrific murderers who found intriguing, creative, and stomach-churning ways to get rid of their victims. Kate Webster. In 1879, Kate Webster was 30 years old and working for the widow Julia Thomas in Richmond, London. The two women did not get on, and one day, Julia asked Kate to leave. Losing her temper, Kate threw Julia down the stairs and strangled her to death. She then dismembered the body and boiled some of it in the copper pot that was usually used for the laundry. She burned Julia's innards and bones on the fire, and then packed what was left into a Gladstone bag, throwing it into the River Thames. She had to throw one of the feet onto a rubbish heap because it would not fit in the bag. Legend has it that Kate gave 2 cups of dripping to a neighbour that was made from the boiling of the body. Over the next few days, she began to sell off all of the furniture in the property, which caused alarm to the neighbours. The police were called in, but Kate fled to her uncle's house in Ireland. Once captured, she was brought back and tried at the Old Bailey and hanged. 131 years later, workers were excavating an old pub in the garden of Sir David Attenborough's home when they unearthed what was identified as Julia Thomas's skull. Dr. Buck Ruxton. Bukcha Rantanji was born in Bombay, India in 1899. He moved to England, changed his name to Buck Ruxton, and set up a practice as a GP in Lancaster, becoming well respected and liked by his patients. Ruxton lived with his common-law wife Isabel, their 3 children, and their housemaid Mary Rogerson in a large home. Isabel was popular and outgoing, and often invited to lots of social functions in the area. But Ruxton believed that she was having an affair, and on the 15th of September 1935, he lost control. He strangled her, then stabbed Mary the maid, who had probably seen the crime being committed. He then dismembered and mutilated the bodies in the bath, before wrapping the parts in sheets, children's clothing, and newspapers. Dr. Ruxton drove 100 miles away and hid the packages around the Scottish countryside. The bodies were identified using new forensic anthropology and entomological techniques. It was the first time that these methods were used to convict a criminal. Ruxton was hanged in a prison in Manchester, and after the trial, the bath that he used was taken to Lancashire Police Headquarters and used as a horse trough. Leonardo Cianciulli. Leonardo was born in Montella, Italy, in 1893. She had 14 children, 10 of which died in infancy, so she was fiercely protective of the remaining 4. Leonardo was known as something of a fortune teller, and in 1939 her eldest son joined the army to fight in World War II. Leonardo decided that the only way to keep him safe was by offering up a human sacrifice. This is when a lady came to her and wanted to know how to find a husband. Leonardo drugged her and killed her with an axe. She then cut up her body and drained the blood into a basin, threw the pieces into a pot, and added caustic soda. After the blood had congealed, she dried it in the oven, ground it up with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs to make crunchy tea cakes, which she then ate with her son, friends, and any guests who joined her thereafter. A lady called Francesca was her second victim, and much like the first, she was also given drugged wine and then killed with an axe. In her own words, this is what Leonardo did with her third victim. She ended up in the pot like the other 2. When she had melted, I added a bottle of cologne, and after a long time on the boil, I was able to make some most acceptable creamy soap. I gave bars to neighbours and acquaintances. The cakes too were better. That woman was really sweet. Once caught, she was sentenced to 30 years in prison, and the pot that was used to boil her victims is on display in the Criminology Museum in Rome. Catherine Knight from Tenterfield, Australia, had a string of failed relationships, and was known to the authorities because of her violent tendencies. She was once committed to a psychiatric hospital for leaving her baby on a railway line. She spent several years as an abattoir worker, and her relationship with a man called John Price was volatile. In February 2000, she stabbed him at least 37 times. Several hours later, she skinned him and hung the meat from the door in the lounge. She then cut off his head, cooked it, and served it with baked potatoes, an assortment of vegetables, and gravy. Catherine then set 2 places at the dining table with name cards for his 2 children. When the police came, after being alerted by a neighbour, they found Knight unconscious in the house after taking pills. Price's head was found in the pot with vegetables, and she was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole, the first Australian woman in history to be given this sentence. Enriqueta Martí. Enriqueta Martí was born in Spain in 1868, and as a young woman, she moved to Barcelona, where she became a prostitute. During the day, she dressed in rags, kidnapped children from the poorer areas of the city, and took them begging. At night, she dressed in luxurious clothes and hired the children, who were aged between 3 and 14, out to paedophiles in high society Barcelona. She also sold expensive slaves and potions to the wealthy. But no one knew she was making her remedies from the remains of the children that she had kidnapped after she killed them. This carried on for over 20 years, and when she was eventually stopped, the police found 50 jars and bowls containing human remains, hair, blood, powdered bones, and pots of potions ready to be sold in just one of her many apartments. As a practicing witch doctor, it's also thought she drank the blood of her victims, giving her the name the Vampire of Barcelona. In 1913, she was lynched and beaten to death in prison by her fellow inmates before she could be tried. So that's 5 disturbing ways killers have disposed of their victims' bodies in the most disgusting ways. If learning about the psychology and motives behind serial killers interests you, then don't forget to check out our Murderous Mind documentaries. Thanks for watching, and my heart goes out to all those victims who died at the hands of these people, and were then subsequently mutilated after passing.